The markets are having a very boring day to close out the week, but don't worry, we have plenty to discuss today. Alibaba, Walmart, the state of crypto. We'll be discussing all of that and more today on Money Never Sleeps. Welcome back, everybody. Excited to be here to close out the week. As we get going, do us a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. If you haven't done that yet, what are we even doing here? Nothing that Kevin or I say is financial advice. Please do your own research before making any buys or sells. Kevin, it once again looks like we are wearing the same color shirt. That has been a theme so far this week that you absolutely love to see. It is a really, really boring day out here in the markets. The TradFi streets are pretty flat across the board. You're seeing little in the way of volatility at the moment. Crypto, pretty boring as well. Yesterday, we saw a sizable move down for a lot of tokens, but today it's kind of fighting for direction. What has your focus as we close out? One of the last, we're coming up on the end of the year. We only got 6 weeks left in the calendar year. So what has your attention right now? And you're on mute at the moment.
Damn, it probably would have been better if I didn't say anything. But yeah, it's there's not too much that's catching my eye, I guess, in TradFi right now. I think a lot of things that are going on are, I kept on saying yesterday was OPEX. I was an idiot. Today is actually OPEX, so everything ends today. So we're just probably seeing, a quiet day to end the week. Also next week being, a holiday on Thursday. I don't necessarily think that there's going to be too much volatility, but I do think we're getting close to an end of a move in TradFi. We could take a look at that in a little bit, but the most important thing I think has my attention is Asia right now. Asia has tons of stuff that's been coming out recently. We can talk about China, we can talk about Japan, we can talk about SoftBank, Alibaba. Just seems like there's a lot of things stirring over there that are foreshadowing maybe something that is coming to the United States sooner or later. But I'm not too confident on a lot of the moves I'm seeing over there. And I think that, at some point we are going to start seeing some of their demand or their lack thereof, bleed over into the US markets.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot going on economic wise, like reports today or next week either. Very, very little happening in the early part of the week before the holiday rolls around on Thursday. We do get some earnings next week. NVIDIA on Tuesday is going to be a big one. We'll see the minutes from the Fed meeting on Tuesday as well. So kind of, curious to see what that looks like, what the Fed was saying in this most recent meeting. Those are really the only things. So I agree with you that I wouldn't be expecting a ton of volatility. It seems like a really good week to just kind of chill, recharge a little bit. That's kind of where I'm at, as how I'm dealing with this market is I have my game plan now as far as what I'm going to be DCAing when it comes to crypto. I have that ready to go. And so now I'm just all right, I just wait and I'll wait as long as I need to. It's kind of at that point where I started my DCAing a little bit, not to the extent that I will here soon, but I'm just kind of ready to let this market, I'm done overthinking it, right? It's very easy right now to try to make too much happen. And that's where people are going to get themselves in trouble.
I couldn't agree more. And, I think a lot of people are really euphoric here, and we're seeing a lot of people chase gains. One thing that I've been kind of using as a metric to see if this is, institutions that are trying to get into the market or market makers are playing around. I've been looking at Coinbase volumes and then looking at Robinhood volumes. Those tend to be the two biggest exchanges when it comes to crypto or stocks for retail investors, right? They're pretty low. So that's really something that's really important, I think, to keep in mind. So, seeing these moves up, I don't necessarily see retail or think retail has the money to be, chasing some of these gains. I do think that hedge funds and a lot of people who had cash on the sides, once it got above a certain level, they started putting money in, it's pushing it up. But I'm not too convinced that anything is going to change right now. And again, another thing with that proves that to me man, I can't get my words out today, is options. Options are still really expensive for, longer term horizon, viewing out, 500 to 1,000 days from now. So I think that a lot of people are anticipating that there is going to be some negative push to the downside at some point, given, next 6 months to next year. And, it's just one of the reasons why I haven't really put any capital into the markets recently. I'm just waiting to see if anything happens. Just been watching this TradFi move. If something does happen where I think that there is a good chance to buy some contracts, might be the play. But I think right now, end of the year, doing too much might be getting yourself into a little bit too much trouble. Now you're on mute, motherfucker.
What a day. I've been out a few
man.
days this week, and I just forget how to use StreamYard, and nothing is working right over here.
It's all good.
What, we can, like I said, TradFi is kind of boring. Let's talk about Walmart for a second. They had earnings yesterday. They beat expectations for Q3. However, they are getting beat up pretty good in the markets today because the expectation moving forward, and this is something that you and I have obviously been just beating over the head for months now, is the health of the consumer is a big concern of theirs moving forward. We already know Walmart is one of the, lower price retailers out there. They do obviously a shit ton of volume. Now they're starting to see the health of the consumers there deteriorating. One thing they mentioned was they've been doing really great with their sales events, but they have seen a noticeable decline in sales volume in the weeks before and the weeks after those events. And that is obviously a big red flag, right? Walmart's already pretty reasonably priced in most areas, whether it's food, clothing, electronics. But when we see that the sales events are getting even more attention and people are, cutting back on what they're spending leading up to that and after that, that's a pretty scary view of the consumer. And, I don't think this is going to impact the upper class as much, but guess what? The middle class and, lower class are going to be absolutely getting destroyed here if we begin to see unemployment go up, if inflation remains sticky. So Walmart's earnings did not paint a rosy picture, did not change how I feel when it comes to consumers. We're starting to see that effect of student loans begin to happen, right? Like we're in our second month of student loans having to be paid, and people are having to make choices in their budget of what they're spending it on. And I think this is just the first of, we're going to start to see it in other retailers, in other food chains, people eating out less, people having to travel less. This is just the beginning, in my opinion, of, the majority of consumers in this country really feeling a pinch.
Couldn't agree more, man. And, just looking at this chart, I just want to look at where Walmart was trading prior to COVID, because, again, I think everything stems from COVID in terms of how much money has been pumped into the system. If we look at Walmart, I mean, it was trading roughly around $100 a share. It's 102, currently sitting at 156. And, it put in all-time highs not too long ago, roughly, 169 up here. But I think one thing that we are kind of forgetting is they had rates at pretty much zero during the time that stimulus was printed, and we had a huge supply chain issues where people had all this money and they were able to pretty much couldn't buy anything that they wanted, and they had to pay a premium on all those goods, right? And that even goes for food and stuff like that, which Walmart was definitely impacted by. But I think that people are continuing to think that the profits that we saw back in 2021, maybe early 2022, are going to be going forward the same. The next year or two, year or three, even, So I think this might be a bit overstretched here. And I think we do have to come down to reality, where we probably won't come up here for a while. We might come back down here and then trade, put in a lower high. It's very possible, unless they do super, quantitative easing. But I don't necessarily see that being the case, especially if, the banks start to get hurt too. We're going to see lines of credit start to dry up. I think the consumer necessarily isn't a bad place, and that's just going to impact these larger corporations eventually. There's a larger percentage of the population that is middle class to lower class, as opposed to the 1%, as everyone likes to say. It's going to impact the larger corporations, and then obviously it's going to impact those people who are employees of them, and then it's just going to be a nonstop downward spiral till we get to a point where there is a bottom. I can't tell you where that is right now, because it seems like dark days ahead if that tends to be the way this plays out.
If we want to talk about large retailers, we should also then transition into Alibaba. If you want to pull up their chart, Alibaba, and now, a while back, God, I sold Alibaba. Not like I sold it at a good time, because it ate shit after I did. And I just got lucky there, I suppose. They had this whole big thing where they announced this restructuring where they're going to spin off into multiple divisions and have different companies, and they're going to try to raise funds for the different ones in different ways. And they're just throwing that out the window now. And that led to a huge sell-off in Alibaba. It's not been great over the last few days. I mean,
11%, almost 12.
That chart, like, where there's a gap every day. Like, what is going on here?
There's bigger problems over in Asia than people truly believe. And this chart just kind of shows you not just what's going on in terms of the consumer demand, exports, and all that stuff that's going on in China, but I was telling you before the show that a huge part of why this is dipping here is the derivatives market over there, right? So we know our friends at SoftBank, wild company, they've had some issues in the past. They had issues last week. Apparently they paid $1.5 billion to WeWork right before they declared bankruptcy. So you can clearly see that they're really good with their money. But back in August of 2022, they made a deal with Alibaba in the derivatives market where they would transition, I believe, 23% of Alibaba's stake that they owned down to 3% if they were able to sell at, I believe, $100 a share, and they would get cash up front. So that was the deal. So if we look back to, August 2022, or I think it was, August of 2022. It was trading around $100 a share, so right around here. But, that contract that they decided to open, once it expires, wherever it expired, if they were out of the money, then they would have to pay collateral and tons of money on top of that to Alibaba and still sell the shares at a loss. But they tend to be in profit, apparently. Obviously, it's way below that $100 share price right now. And, they borrowed a lot of cash up front back in August of 2022 to open that up. And now they have offloaded pretty much all of their Alibaba. I don't know if the contract's expired yet, but I'm pretty sure that they're going to want to close it sooner than later, given how much this has dropped down. But we haven't seen that demand for a squeeze yet that's pushed it up. And I think that's because there's a lot of pressure over in Asia. Also in Japan, where they just don't need that price to go up. SoftBank clearly needs cash. I think they've netted a $34 billion profit from that trade. I don't necessarily think that shows that they're doing okay. I think there's a lot of issues going on with SoftBank, and they're just bad investments. And I mean, I'll just say it, Japan does not seem like it knows what it's doing right now in itself. I think that we're seeing some really bad demand issues over in Asia, and Alibaba, a lot of stuff that's going on, the news headlines that we're seeing in the US, but we're starting to see some of the derivatives markets very similar to 2008 almost, right? Where a lot of derivatives screwed over a lot of people in the US markets. Well, we're starting to see it over there, and I wouldn't be surprised if the same thing is going on when it comes to the Chinese property market as well.
Yeah, the derivatives, the synthetics, like these, oh God, it just doesn't end well because people are greedy, stupid. So it's like, I don't know how many times, like, I am just, I think about this stuff. I'm like, why are these people the way that they are? And I just don't get it. But that's really not up for us to worry about. We need to just figure out how we're going to handle this whole thing. Let's talk about Bank of Japan a little bit more, and then let's get into some of the charts quickly to close out the week. I want to, on some of the short-term durations, I wonder if there is an opportunity here for, in the crypto market. I think, problems are coming ahead, but I kind of like the idea of seeing if there's anywhere we can go in the next couple of weeks through the end of the year. But let's get into Bank of Japan first, and then we'll move into crypto.
Definitely. So Bank of Japan, I'm just going to read the headline because it says, cannot say decisively that a weak yen is negative for Japan's economy. So this thing was going towards 152 earlier this morning, and it seems like it's pulled back considerably. It's down below 149 against the US dollar. But it was really interesting to see this. And this is really scary because what they say, in some of the other stuff that they were talking about, the top one for me was that they don't have necessarily a specific set price for where they want to intervene when it comes to the currencies, which means that they could just let this run wild if it really gets to that. They also don't want to sell any other ETFs or any other securities at a loss. So they're waiting to finally, offload some of those when the time is right. They've had super loose policy where they're pretty much, you're getting paid a percentage for taking out loans from the Bank of Japan or any of those banks. The rates were just negative for a period of time, and they're continuing to be. But is that going to change at some point? He's saying that with the weak Japanese yen is also good for exports. But I'm going to shoot over to this real quick. Exports in Japan are starting to slow. So that's really interesting to see as well. And that's because China is also playing a huge part in this. So China's exports have been, get out of here. How do I report this ad? No, there you go. All right. Didn't give me an X. Madman. But yeah, so Japan's export growth slows as China's global downturn risks loom. Obviously, a lot of the issues are in the property market when it comes to China, but also we're seeing that a lot of people are unemployed. There's not as much demand for exports, Chinese exports, and we saw that it dropped, believe negative 6.4, negative 6.7. It was somewhere around there in the month of October, which is a huge drop off, right? It's terrible to see, one of the largest exporters in the world have a drop off that bad. If we look at Japan's exports, we can see that their October ones were 1.6%, but year over year, the imports were down 12.5%. Also really interesting considering that Japan is an importer because they have literally an island and nothing else around them. So you'd think that they would be importing a lot more. Shows you that demand is coming down in Japan. And they say they expect exports to bottom in mid-2024. I tend to disagree. I think that we are seeing that low demand. We're probably going to see contraction in exports when it comes to Japan as well. That raises a whole nother question when we start to look at GDP. I mean, could we see a technical recession for Japan at some point in the next 6 months? It's very possible, right? So that's going to be something really important to see. And if we're seeing the demand issues in two of the largest economies in the world, also which are offloading U.S. treasuries like crazy, China is now below $800 billion dollars worth of U.S. treasuries. So they've been offloading for the past few quarters. I would be very concerned when I look at Asia. There is a good chance that if things are slowing down in the second and third biggest economies in the world, I think that it's a matter of time before we start seeing the number one, and that is us. So just keep that in mind. But that's all I got to say on that. Asia, very scary. Keep an eye on it.
All right, let's get into crypto then. I want to get, maybe something a little actionable here, but we've seen, this kind of back and forth the last few days. If we want to look at Bitcoin or ETH, let's start with Bitcoin. If we want to look at this from a daily view, we've seen this kind of like alternating. We had starting last Saturday, we saw pullback. We saw that nice day on Wednesday, gave a bunch of it back on Thursday, and now today we're kind of struggling to find the direction that we want to go. If we look at some of the technicals here, we look at some of the patterns, the momentum that it has. Where do we think that over the next, let's say the rest of the year? Okay, I want to kind of talk about like a shorter time frame, the remainder of 2023. We got, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Like I said, 6 weeks left in the year. What kind of movement do you think we're going to see around this time?
I think that there's a lot of things going on in the background, and with the technicals still being relatively strong in terms of the shorter time frames, we're seeing the stochastic RSI move up and down rapidly. However, the larger time frames, we're seeing the weekly, weekly just got into the overbought territory last week, so we have to see how that plays out. I think there's a good chance we could continue to stay up in this range for a period of time. I think the level that we need to be watching is $39,000 to $40,000, right? I think that there's a good chance that we could see one last push up there. It seems like there's a lot of things coming in the form of regulation, and that hasn't stopped a lot of the tether printing. So I would necessarily believe that they're going to continue going on until something stops them. And again, we're seeing this buy up here, then it drops, people are buying into the zone and then they're selling out of it. That's distribution. That's a supply zone for me. So I think that it is going to be a bit difficult to break some of these resistance, especially up here. It looks like you got 3 times you've touched this line right here at 37,961. So above that 37,9 to like 38K. Once you break that, I think there's a good chance we could probably get closer to that 39 to 40,000. But that's the level I think right now. 38K, if you break that and you stay above it and you get a close above it, I think 39.40 is very possible. But I do think that we are going to see this swing trading back and forth, especially if we look at the daily, right? Stochastic RSI is nice and oversold now. There's a good chance that this could be rally up here and then just wait for it to get to overbought again. And you could see another dump like this. It could just be, even if you want to go on the shorter time frames, 4 hourly, right? just wait and see where a lot of this is lining up. I mean, if you want to trade this 38K level, if you want to long into 38K, I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea. But then obviously you might want to short back into it. It depends what it's going on at the time. I think the shorter time frames are going to be what you're going to want to watch if you want to see that long to 40K. I'm personally not touching crypto. Again, I've said that period of times, but I think Bitcoin is the one if you want to be in any of the crypto markets right now that you're probably going to have maybe the better chance of liquidity coming in. I just don't necessarily think that alts are too stable. I mean, we saw 6% down for Bitcoin, then it rallied 6% the next day. Alts, we're seeing some massive dumps. We saw great gains, but we're seeing massive dumps too, right? Look at Matic now. We were looking at it was 98 cents a few days ago. It's currently 81 cents. So, you know, you're going to start seeing a liquid market start to form, and that means that they can push the price really fast in either direction. I think there is enough liquidity in Bitcoin, you know, people who are longtime believers that, you know, actually used USD and not just USDT to push the price up in the years prior. That's, you know, potentially this could be a bit more of a stable play in the you know, next 6 weeks or so.
All right. How about ETH? Let's take a quick look at ETH, and then we can go into any other tokens you like as we wrap it up.
Absolutely. It's a pretty good move down, right? You saw that. I mean, this is the 4-hourly. It's that, but it was up at 2,100. Looks like it got rejected right there at 2,136. We're currently, you know, how much percentage is that down from there? Roughly 8% or so, almost 9%. So it's a really good move down. We can see that it's oversold on the daily. And if we're looking at this move on the daily, you know, obviously ETH has pretty good rally here. This is a 3-wave move, in my opinion, from what I'm seeing, right? Maybe it's a 5-wave move if we go into some of the smaller time frames, but I see 3 waves up. I see 1, you know, a small pullback here, and then 2, 3. So let's see, something like this, I would say. But there is the chance, and I will say this, that we could push a little bit higher if we are looking at this as a 5-wave move, because this could be a pullback. The thing is, if we start to close below this high rate here of 1869, then that was a 3-wave move, and we can anticipate, you know, 5 waves move down or some type of corrective pattern to the downside. But with how it's oversold here, and, you know, the volumes are here pushing pretty hard to the downside red. Be interested to see what the funding rates also look like on these. Let me just pull that up real quick too. I haven't actually looked at ETH's funding rate in a while, but if it's pretty negative, there could be a bit of a squeeze that is possible. Let me see ETH right now. ETH is sitting at, it's pretty positive. There's a few exchanges where it's negative, nothing too crazy, but, you know, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, mainly with Bitcoin dominance also seeming to have a pretty good resurgence, 52.63. It'll probably get to 53 in the coming month or so. But I think that right now, if we have to see ETH go below 1869, then we can anticipate that it's going to be a move to the downside. And I would anticipate alts would also do something very similar. But obviously right now, this is a pretty good level of rejection. The key thing is where this ends up on the weekly close. Again, daily is oversold. However, if we look at this on the weekly, overbought. Look at this on the monthly, you know, it's going to be overbought by the time we get to December, right? And look at that massive rejection candle that we got there. We got one up here. We got one here. Eventually, it's just not going to be able to push up higher than that, and we're going to be making our move to the downside. And again, if we're looking at this on the macro, which let me get to a different chart because that's just way too much crazy shit going on there. Right here, yeah, easy to see. A, B, C coming down, not to $200, but maybe like, say, 650 for the time being, say something like that. That's very possible after a 5-way move to the upside. So again, we just want to see where that top is. Maybe there's just, you know, one leg to push up above this at 2137 or whatever level it is. But I do think that if we continue trending down this weekend, get below 19, get close to that 1869, pretty good chance that we are in a move to the downside, and also probably follow pretty soon.
All right. Any other tokens that you want to discuss? Otherwise, I am all good to wrap it up.
Yeah, we take a look at a few just real quick. Binance, obviously, I'm bringing this up because I believe the chief of counterterrorism and cybersecurity stepped down last night. So that's a good sign, right? But again, I think that comes on the news that 57 members of Congress wrote a letter to Janet Yellen and Joe Biden asking them to take a look into potential DOJ charges when it comes to Binance because their links to China and also terrorism. So to see this person step down, pretty interesting that the price isn't necessarily doing too much. We've been range bound, right? We're just seeing that we're on this 200 moving average on the daily, just back and forth, back and forth. So I think there's another push to the upside. Yeah, I think it's possible. I mean, look at these massive moves we've seen. This shows you that it's in a liquid market and there's a lot of manipulation. This move right here is 4.5% up, then 3.49% down. Then we got over here, a pretty good move, 2.63% down. Then we got 4.75% up, 4.38% down. Now we're oversold, and this is just absolute chaos. And again, we're probably going to see a golden cross at some point. They're going to try to get it, but they could also just short this down. I don't necessarily think that Binance wants to short their own token, so I'm gonna be on the offensive when it comes to Binance and anticipate that it's probably going to stay above this 200 EMA as long as they can. But again, if we look at this on the weekly, it's completely overbought, and you're within the jaws of a 50 and a 200 EMA. You're just hitting back and forth, back and forth. I don't know if they really wanted to get this close down to the 200 EMA on the weekly. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out. Solana had a really good pullback. We can start to see that these wicks are coming down. It tells me that there is distribution up in this level. They're just selling it off and taking profit. We were talking about it yesterday. Solana is heavily VC backed. And we also know that they're, it's one of the tokens that back in the bull run, they were paying influencers to pretty much shill. That's why it got so much FOMO and people are excited. We also know how much exposure that FTX did have to Solana. So seeing that they have the ability to be selling $100 million worth of crypto per week, and we know that they have a massive amount of Solana that they can sell until I believe 2026 once it gets unlocked. It's no surprise to me that if it remains at these levels, we're probably going to continue to see these distribution back and forth for tokens like this. I haven't seen too much recently. Oh, here, let's take a look at Matic, because Matic had a really good dump recently. I still believe I'm going to lose this bet 100%. I'm not worried about it at all, because I do think that Matic's going to be down very soon to the point where, I'll make that $100 back in like 2 hours, because it's going to be, 30 cents or less. I'm not even opposed to saying that it'll go down to 20 or 10 cents, but let's just see where we are in the market at that point. But this is a good rejection, right? We had a really good move to the upside. This is, again, could we have another wave to the upside? Possibly. That's the one thing I'm concerned about. But at the same time, we could argue that's, wave 1, 2, wave 3, wave 4, and this is wave 5. And now what we want to see is, wave A, something like that, B, then C, and we come down, maybe back into that 60-cent range or something like that. Who knows? But we are seeing that on the daily. It is getting oversold fairly fast. If we get another push to the downside, maybe we'll get that B wave rally. But I do think that by the time it's, December 5th, which is roughly 2 weeks from now, it's still going to be well above the level that we had, made the bet on 30 cents. So I think we'll probably be in the 65 to 75 cent range at that time. But if they do print some more money, then obviously we're going to have to keep an eye on that. Last thing we will take a look at, because I don't think there's too much more that we need to go over. You can see that USDC is still 24.12 billion. It's bleeding out. It's down 42 million today, but it was below 24 billion for a few days there. It's at 23.81 billion. And if we look at USDT, I'm pretty sure that's probably up too, right? Yep, $106 million. It's up today, and it's at 87.54. It was just a week ago when Paulo Arodino said that, tweeted out like 87.1 billion for Tether's market cap. So there's definitely something that we need to be concerned with when we look at that. Again, we saw that the New York Department of Financial Services, they want Coinbase to pretty much delist Tether, GUSD, a bunch of other coins like that, or they want their approval before listing them, or they have to leave, the state of New York operating their crypto license. So a lot of interesting stuff in there. I still think that there's a lot of things to be concerned when it comes to these stable coins. BlackRock clearly seems to have that position too, but just be careful. I mean, they could print a ton of money out of nowhere, and the next thing you know, markets are going to rally, and that could get us to that 39,000-40,000 level. I just think that right now we're in a distribution phase, so people are just taking their profits and definitely getting out of the markets out of these positions, anticipating that there is going to be more volatility come 2024.
Okay. I think that is a good way for us to wrap it up for the week. We'll be back Monday through Wednesday next week. We'll be taking off Thanksgiving and most likely Friday as well. So we'll be here talking through any news that's impacting TradFi, crypto, all that good stuff. If you have not yet, do us a favor, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, drop a comment, share us out on social. You know the drill. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Have an awesome weekend. Stay safe out there. If you're traveling for next week, safe travels, and we'll see you on Monday.
Take care, everyone.